Hello again there, folks. Steve here. I'm just out at a little cafe waiting for a friend for a meeting. I thought I'd say hello. Haven't seen me much on Facebook lately. It's because, or not Facebook, or for that matter, YouTube. It's because I'm writing again. I spent, as you know, over 6 months on the road, walking 8,000 kilometers for freedom, and now I'm writing about some of the details and thoughts that went through my mind as I went on that walk. And yeah, I'm just going to start relaying a few of the little comments about what it is, the lessons that I learned. Basically, that's kind of the theme of the writing. It's not so much to be some sort of a guru or to teach people about stuff, about what you should take away as a lesson. What I'm trying to relay is the lessons that I have learned, which I think they're helpful for me, and in the process maybe they can give ideas to other people, right? But today, before I come out here, I was writing about this comment that I was in a place near Vermilion Bay, Northern Ontario, and I began to see evidence of old homesteads, right? And a lot of times when I was walking along, I would just make notes of this sort of thing, but it didn't dawn on me as something significant. I'd go through thought processes as I walked along, because a lot of the walk involved thinking, involved being absorbed in my own thoughts, obviously, right, hour after hour after hour on the road. And I began to think about the differences between, the nature of us being subject to forces, right? Subject to the forces of nature versus subject to the forces of government, for example, and the implications there. And I realized that these people, these early settlers, in spite of queens or whoever they were, claiming them as subjects. I mean, for practical purposes, some far-off queen bloviating about how, she had all these subjects. These folks living out in the hinterlands of the wilds of Northern Ontario at the time, where the northern, it wasn't even Ontario, it was whatever the people called it at the time, which is hinterland, right? And I mean, they didn't get any permits for anything, or to build their houses, or to put in their sewage systems, or get gun licenses, or whatever. They were, from that respect, they were free, but they were subject to the forces of nature, right? They had to react to nature in order to survive. Nature was an obstacle to their just mere whims, right? If they just wanted to go for a walk in the middle of winter, they would die, right? So they couldn't just react to their own whims. They had to be subject to the awareness of nature, right? And I think this applies to us in government on an individual level in the moment, right? How much can we do in the moment to change the mass delusion of many people that results in government? Probably not a lot. So we can see it as the same way. We can see it as we are subject to all of that that's going on. And we can use a framework similar to that of nature, that we frame ourselves within that and say, okay, well, my freedom exists within that framework of the bounds of nature. And I will build my microclimates of freedom, like as the settlers did. They built little houses that they could heat to survive the winter. It's like a microclimate from which they could exercise their own freedom to live, right? Well, we have to do the same for ourselves, I think, in terms of our compromises and what it is that we do in life in terms of society and governments. However, the difference is that nature is the empirical real world, right? And at least I haven't figured out a way to make any reasonable change on that. It is what it is. However, with the mass delusions of people that result in government, through us living our lives and being a good example and striving for greater freedoms, it has a rub-off effect on other people. And in time, we evolve, and sometimes quite quickly. Society can evolve quite quickly through enlightenment periods and what have you, to actually make big changes so that the norm of what is called government or whatever begins to change quite rapidly. Unlike nature, in spite of what people talk about, this massive global warming going on, I don't see much evidence of it, and it is what it is, right? But we can make a huge difference in our social climate. But in the moment, though, we have to react like the early settlers, I think. We have to react that in the moment, individually, we're not going to change people, and we're going to build our frameworks within that to build our microclimates that allow for our freedom of internal expression and so on. But over time, we can be the force that makes change in the world, that then allows for greater freedom. So it allows us to expand our envelope, our framework of freedom. And this was very profound to me at that moment, because here I was walking on a modern road, right? A modern road in relative comfort compared to what they had to do by blazing their way through the forest to find the particular lake that they settled on and set up a subsistence farm or something on it, and trapped and hunted and so on, just to survive, right? It was mere survival. Subject to huge forces. They didn't have government overbodies to oversee their permitting for everything they did. They didn't have any of that, but they had the nature. And we less so are driven by nature now, but more so by the whims of the mass delusion. And I think very strongly we can make a difference in that, little by little. It's just our approach to it. And I can talk more about that later as to what I feel is things that we can do to make a difference. But suffice to say, as far as a freedom lesson, I think it's to recognize that we are subject to forces that seem beyond our control in the moment and individually, but on the social side, rather than so much on the natural side, we can make a difference by living our lives in a certain way that is admirable and that will have a rub-off effect on others. And in time, we can be the forces that make a difference in the world. Steve here again, great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.